I am a huge fan of the original Spyro games, my favourite being Year of the Dragon, and I have a lot of nostalgia for A Hero's Tale. These games defined my childhood with the vibrant worlds, charming characters, and wonderful platforming gameplay. So, when I heard whispers of another, one that people only mentioned in hushed tones in dark corners, I knew I had to experience it for myself. Enter the Dragonfly. Now, I'd heard the reputation. I'd seen it on worst games lists, but I wanted to see if it really was as bad as everyone claimed. Could it truly be that terrible? I mean, it's Spyro. How bad could it be really? So, I found a copy, loaded it up, and... Oh god, what is that? What did they do? Oh no! But why? Right off the bat, something has gone very, very wrong. The characters that I loved, Spyro, Sparks, Hunter, they all looked like they were hastily crafted from plasticine by someone who'd only seen rough sketches of the originals. The textures were muddy, the models looked slightly off, the animation was janky and puppet-like. There was this uncanny valley quality to everything. And the dragonflies. Oh. Look, I know we've had issues with how Sparks looks across various Spyro games, but this thing here, this absolute monstrosity that they created, what happened? I'm not one to judge games purely on aesthetics. Graphics can be rough, especially in that awkward early PS2 era. But for me, gameplay is key. So I thought, I'll push forward and really dig into what this game had to offer. What did it do well? What were the really good ideas? And what can be improved? And, well... From the moment I started playing, I encountered problems that I have not seen very often in commercially released games, especially around this time. It wasn't just about the dated graphics or questionable design choices. This was the fundamental stability issues. The game crashed a lot. Not just once or twice. We're talking repeated, constant crashes. I thought maybe I had a bad disc, so I tried a second copy. Same issue. Then I went to emulation, thinking that might provide a little bit more stability. No, it crashed there too. But that was just the beginning of the technical nightmare. There were moments where the entire world would just disappear. I'd be running through a level, and suddenly I'd be controlling a floating purple dragon in a void of nothingness. Spyro's animations would freeze mid-action, leaving him stuck in a pose while still being able to press some buttons. Or even, sometimes the buttons would just stop responding entirely, forcing me to just restart the whole console. Even the music, one of the few elements that actually showed promise, would bug out, stuttering and looping incorrectly. After spending a total of 4 hours wrestling with this game, I'd only managed to complete 2 levels. And I'm gonna be completely honest with you, that was as far as I could push myself. I genuinely tried to give this game a fair shot. It just felt like it was fighting me every single step of the way. Beyond the crashes and the glitches, there were fundamental gameplay issues that made this experience frustrating even when things were working. The whole game felt off in its entirety, in ways that are difficult to articulate, but they're impossible to ignore once you notice them. The camera was actively fighting against me, especially when I was charging. In the original Spyro games, the camera was your partner, smoothly following the action and giving you the view you needed. Sometimes it had an issue here and there, but this one felt like it had a mind of its own, juddering, getting caught on the geometry at worst possible moments, or sometimes not moving at all until I let go of the movement stick. The controls felt clunky and unresponsive. There was this lag between input and action that made precise platforming, a core element of the Spyro gameplay, feel more like a gamble. Jumps that should have been simple felt uncertain. Combat that should have felt satisfying was awkward and didn't have any weight to it. The audio design was also bizarre. Voice lines never seemed to sync up properly with the character animations, like watching a poorly dubbed foreign film, except this was supposed to be a AAA game, and the levels themselves, while they looked pretty nice and had some decent music, felt barren and devoid of the personality that made the original trilogy so memorable. The originals had NPCs with character, environmental storytelling, and a sense of life to each world. Here, everything felt hollow, like a pretty window dressing, with nothing behind it. So, what happened? How did we go from the beloved Spyro trilogy to this? Well, the development story of Enter the Dragonfly is a cautionary tale that we are still seeing play out in the games industry today. After Insomniac Games finished Spyro Year of the Dragon, they were done with the franchise. They wanted to move on to new projects, new ideas, which would then eventually lead them to create Ratchet & Clank. But Universal Interactive saw a cash cow, and they weren't ready to let go of Spyro. He was a system seller, a beloved character, and they wanted another game. So they turned to Equinox Digital Entertainment and Check 6 Studios, giving them the task of creating the next Spyro adventure, and initially, the ambitions were huge. The original vision for Enter the Dragonfly was fascinating. They planned a more RPG-focused experience with an open-world structure featuring changing seasons. The tone was going to be darker and more serious. The scope was much bigger, 24 levels with 120 dragonflies to collect, compared to the final game's meager 9 levels and 90 dragonflies. They weren't bad ideas. In fact, some of them sound genuinely interesting, and could have evolved the franchise in compelling ways. But then, reality set in. During development, the game struggled with severe frame rate issues on the PlayStation 2 hardware. This isn't something that is unusual, because a lot of game developers also had problems, but the team was trying to push the console in ways they weren't experienced with, and it showed. Then came the pressure that would ultimately doom the project. The demand for a Christmas release. This is where the story becomes all too familiar to modern gamers. We've seen it with Cyberpunk 2077, with Anthem, with countless other titles that had grand visions crushed by unrealistic timelines. When that Christmas deadline loomed, the decision was made to drastically cut content. Those 24 levels down to 9. The open world scaled back. The RPG elements gone completely. The darker tone abandoned for the familiarity of older games. And even what remained wasn't given the time it needed. The game was rushed out the door, incomplete and broken. What could have been a vibrant evolution of the Spyro formula ended up feeling hollow, glitchy and unfinished. Because it was unfinished. It's not all doom and gloom though. Despite the disaster that was Enter the Dragonfly, some of the ideas conceived during its development did survive and find their way into later, better Spyro games. The elemental breath abilities became a staple feature in subsequent titles. The RPG elements that were planned, they were refined and properly implemented in later games. They weren't bad concepts. They just needed more time and better execution. In a way, Enter the Dragonfly served as a really rough prototype for ideas that would eventually flourish in games like A Hero's Tale and even influence direction of the later Skylanders series. Enter the Dragonfly represents everything that can go wrong when a beloved franchise is handed off without proper planning, time, or resources. This was Spyro's leap into new hardware, his chance to show what the character could do on the PlayStation 2. Instead of soaring to new heights, he stumbled, fell, and landed at the bottom of a very deep well. The game could have been so much more. The ideas were there, the potential was there, but the execution, hampered by technical limitations, studio inexperience, and corporate pressure, turned what could have been a celebration of Spyro into a cautionary tale. Looking back, I'm genuinely glad I missed this game when I was younger. The original trilogy meant so much to me, and having this be my introduction to the PS2 era of Spyro could have soured me on the whole franchise. In many ways, this could have been the game that killed Spyro, and it very nearly was. We learn from failures, and the gaming industry certainly needs to learn from this one. Enter the Dragonfly stands as a reminder of why games need proper development time, why rushing to meet arbitrary deadlines is almost never worth it, and why some franchises need to be handled with care by developers who understand what made them special in the first place. And hey, eventually it did lead to the Reignited trilogy, which reminded us why we all fell in love with these games to begin with. So yes, Enter the Dragonfly really is as bad as most people say. I don't think I can actually recommend this game to anyone, unless you want to experience it for yourself, or you have a strong nostalgia for when you personally played it. But now I can say I've experienced it for myself, and I have the receipts and the trauma to prove it.